Greg Claxton with the Planning Department. I'm going to walk through the way that I walked you through last week, what we've been doing for the past year in Nashville Next. I'm now going to talk through what we're working on right now. A big part of that is developing our scenarios. So as we're using them, what we mean by scenarios are basically a plausible story about the future. We want to use a story that sort of connects changes that we can make in our land uses and our infrastructure, and then explore the consequences of those decisions, in all of the other areas that the people of Nashville have told us they care about: arts and culture, housing affordability, health and livability, that sort of thing. As we work through these, kind of looking at the physical form of Nashville, there's a few common elements to all of the scenarios that we want to use to keep them comparable and sort of keep the community conversation moving along. The first is that they're looking at the same growth numbers. They're all allocating about 100,000 houses, 200,000 people, and 300,000 jobs. And they also all have the same roadway improvements. Third is they treat some key flashpoints in Nashville's kind of ongoing discussion over the direction that growth should take from the past few years. We try to treat those the same. In particular, we're not identifying Bell's Bend or the fairgrounds for activity centers, and all of the scenarios show some form of higher capacity transit on West End. Last, the scenarios kind of play with how we accommodate different housing and employment growth. We're looking at kind of where we do the heavy lifting for that. None of this is meant to say that smaller neighborhood centers and nodes won't continue to happen and develop over time. I don't want to go into a lot of detail on this, but I do want to give you a sense of what kind of the guts of the scenarios are like. We have a tool called Community Viz, which is basically a GIS tool that we use to model development decisions. And there are three things that we feed into Community Viz. The first is the supply of land. Davidson County minus the satellite cities, but also minus floodplains, steep slopes, those kind of environmental constraints. Second is market suitability. These are 13 factors that tell us how likely or unlikely a property is to develop or redevelop over the next 25 years. Things like retail proximity, transportation features, that sort of thing. And then the third are policies, land use policies, either future land use characteristics or character areas such as rural, suburban, and urban. We feed those three things into Community Viz, and what it tells us is where we should expect population and employment to locate over the next 25 years based on that. And then once it places more people here, more jobs there, it also gives us some quantitative indicators on some basically land use and transportation measures, such as vehicle miles traveled, amount of land developed, that sort of thing. So as an example of the kind of thing that Community Viz will tell us, there's three maps up on the screen. The one with kind of pink blobs show over the next 25 years where are new employment concentrations. The blue blobs show over the next 25 years where are new household concentrations. And then the third map are kind of key transportation features. And then what we're working on right now is how do we put those together in a way that's sort of easily accessible to the public. And so, kind of combining all of those, this is what we call our business as usual trend or trend scenario. Projecting out based on the model, where do we expect growth to happen, just without any additional interventions. Some infill development, some continued outward development. And then, trying to play with how do we represent that, kind of taking those blues for households, pinks for jobs, and then overlaying them to see kind of those concentrations of purple where we expect kind of mixed use development. This is the only scenario that we've run so far through Community Viz. The next three that I'm going to show you are basically the policy inputs that we provide Community Viz. And so the first one is sort of an expanded downtown scenario. The idea here is we're taking the current transit vision that Metro, MTA, and the MPO have been developing over the past several years, which is very much a hub and spoke system where everything leads into downtown. And we say, how do we make this work a little bit better? And so what we've identified here is, you need to make downtown, even more so than it is today, really the population and economic hub of the county. And so we've got some purple areas there showing, much higher intensity of use in downtown, in midtown, in Metro Center, and to the southeast a little bit. We also say, well, you want to accommodate additional housing close to downtown, even if it's not necessarily right in downtown. And so in the light blue areas, we're looking at, kind of encouraging a little bit of infill in neighborhoods near to downtown, but then also along those transit pikes coming out of downtown, with the idea that you want to accommodate, additional population in a way that they can get to downtown easily, because that's, again, going to be your employment center.
Greg, if I just could wait one thing here. These scenarios actually came out of the mapping issues and exercises that we did with the community. So as what Greg talked about at the last meeting, we showed those mapping exercises and we digitized those. And so these were really what came out of those.
Right. And so two of the most popular ones, one of them was this kind of expanded downtown view. A lot of people, as you saw in those maps, put a lot of growth downtown. The other one was where people were putting a lot of growth onto the pikes. And so this next scenario we call pikes and centers takes the transit vision that we had in the previous one and then starts adding in a lot more crosstown connections so that you can get through different parts of the county without going through downtown. And so here the idea is we continue to have some smaller of those purple intense areas scattered throughout the county, but we're also building up more on all of the pikes, the ones that go into downtown and the crosstown connectors. The next scenario is kind of more of a centers with infill, where we keep that transit network with crosstown connectors, but we remove some of the development along the pikes and focus more into a smaller set of intense activity centers throughout the county. So these are smaller, or fewer, but more intense compared to the other one. And then we pair this with some residential infill close to each one of these. Within about a quarter mile of each one of these centers, we would encourage some context-sensitive infill. One of the things that we want to try to do through the conversation about these scenarios is see if there's a way that we can give some future policy direction on how infill can work a little bit better for the city right now. Is there a way that we can find a way that it respects the context that it's fitting within, but also helps us adapt to some changing housing market preferences that we've been seeing and struggling with over the past several years. We know that it's difficult for people to sometimes make sense of exactly what these maps with different blobs mean. So we're also working on different ways of visualizing these scenarios. This is an example of a downtown visualization where we want to zero in on a few key places and show what does it mean, what are the differences between these scenarios in terms of how they'd be built out. We also know that the public wants to understand what do these scenarios mean, not just kind of where the people go, but for things that are important to them, such as transportation and affordability. So this is an example of how we want to bring the results of those indicators to the public to allow them a chance to weigh these scenarios and tell us what's important to them. On the left, you see two of the possible outcomes: transportation choices and household affordability. The letters across the top, A would be our business as usual scenario. We're holding that constant. That's what everything's being compared against. And then B, C, and D have arrows that show this one performs better, this one performs worse, this one's about the same. We think that's about the kind of detail that we can provide in a very broad public engagement exercise to get some feedback on what direction we should go. Right now, we're working with 9 of those outcomes that we'd like to present to the public: transportation affordability, but also environmental quality, neighborhood variety, fiscal impact. Are we expanding opportunities for youth, children, and seniors, economic opportunity, equity, and then health and wellness? And so how we want to kind of manage this a little bit is we've got some quantitative data from community biz and our modeling, and then we want to rely on our housing resource team, this team of about 20 to 30 experts on 6 different topics that we've brought together, who know the topic, who know Nashville, and can help us make some assessments and say, for affordability compared to business as usual, does each scenario improve or worsen affordability across income levels? And that rating is what we would take to the public to weigh in on. Our goal would be to not, kind of have a voting process where the top voting scenario wins, but to delve into, why people prefer different things. And so we'd ask, which 1 or 2 scenarios do you prefer, and then why? Out of those indicators, what are the ones that made you choose that? And we'd have, as we've done throughout the process, a number of different ways for people to participate. That's what Tiffany's going to delve into in a lot more detail at your next meeting. Thank you, and I can take questions.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question for Greg. The different scenarios are not necessarily, we're not asking which of these is appropriate and which is inappropriate necessarily. Ultimately, I'm assuming that the general plan is going to represent a variety of strategies, right? Not just one over the other.
What we're looking to put together is one preferred scenario. We expect it to be a composite of several of them that sort of takes what the public sees as the strengths of different ones and try to put them together into a composite.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
And we're just so we're in the process. This will be basically reviewed by the public from May through July. We'll have that out there for. And we're developing a whole engagement process for that 3-month period that we'll talk to you a little bit more about in one of the future meetings before that.
Okay. Greg?
One of the things that I've noticed over the growth of Davidson County, and you read a lot of statistics about transportation, the transportation piece. One of the worst traffic in the United States in Davidson County. I know that in our area, in the southeast part of Davidson County with the large household area, does the plan also include expansion of roads and also transit? And I noticed it had some of that, but I want to make sure that we're addressing all modes of transportation. And because on Harding Place and Nolensville Road, going out towards Nolensville, there's not an interstate near there hardly.
Right.
And it becomes a major issue for Southeast, and I know other parts of the county as well, and I just want to make sure that's part of the discussions.
It is. All of the scenarios incorporate basically the planned roadway improvements that Davidson County has worked with the MPO to plan for over the next 25 years. But then we go beyond that to look at, kind of the key transit improvements. And so the scenarios all put both of those together to see how they work to both increase access to transit, increase walkability, but also manage congestion.
Okay.
Does that include TDOT? Are y'all working with TDOT and the MPO, or
Yes.
just the MPO?
No, TDOT and the MPO.
And the MTA.
And
yeah.
the MTA.
So.
Thank you.